All right, let's talk about what is happening in the world. Now, for the last few days, very consistently, the India development debate has been telling you about a global energy crisis that is brewing. We saw that in China, where several provinces faced power cuts, some blackouts, even in residential areas. Here in India, we're facing coal shortages. Some of our power plants have coal left just for 4 to 10 days. In Europe, gas prices have surged. In UK, petrol pumps are running dry. So what exactly are we seeing? Are we seeing the beginnings of a global energy crisis? And what are the reasons for this? How far-reaching will it be? Its impact coming at a time when several economies are actually surviving and resurging after COVID-19. To get an idea of what is going on, Paul Hickin is on the show today. He's the Associate Editorial Director at Platts. Ole Hansen of Saxo Bank is also with us on the show. Welcome to both of you and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Paul, let me begin by just asking you the simple, very basic question. Are we truly seeing a global energy crisis, or are these unconnected events just happening at the same time in various parts of the world?
It all stems, they are connected, and there is a crunch right now. If you look back to the stimulus packages that came through and the resurgence in Asian economies, especially at a time when we already had some shortages in energy, and it also feeds into the questions around energy transition, because many of these economies now have diversifying more into wind, into solar, and these have more unreliable systems, and secondly, they don't have the same storage levels and storage resources to back up energy grids, electricity grids, in the way, for example, say oil works, and the amount of oil we have in storage. And oil, if we can take it by a comparison, oil, for example, has built in from the 73-74 Arab oil embargo and the IEA mandating that OECD countries have 90 days worth of storage. Oil has built in those redundancies. And if you look at where in, for example, other fossil fuels, gas and coal and renewables, it doesn't have the same buffers in place.
Okay. Mr. Hansen, how do you look at this situation? Many are commenting that at least in Europe and in the United Kingdom, this is also a byproduct of the attempts to switch more and more to renewable energy. Do you see it in that perspective? And what, in your view, explains the surge in gas prices in Europe?
I think Paul explained that really quite brilliantly. It is really the global economy that's running on a high octane right now after the recovery, and that's basically led to these shortages. You are right. Specifically in Europe, we do have an issue because the share of renewable energy into the energy mix has been increasing quite strongly over the past few years, and as Paul mentioned, it simply doesn't give you the reliability of electricity and power in the system, and that basically means we have had just from this past quarter, it's actually been a very, very weak wind year in Europe so far this year, and that has added to the problems. And so with production of gas in Europe slowly decreasing from the North Sea, from the Netherlands, we are making ourselves more and more dependent on outside sources of energy. Right now, obviously, Russia is a focal point. We've got Norway, and then we've got LNG. But at the same time, renewables is very much the way we want to go forward in Europe. But we're experiencing now the hiccups when you have days where the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow strong enough. You have this you have this stress on the system, and that's requiring and that's part of the story that's leading to this surge we've seen recently.
Yeah, let's look at the situation back in India as well. And former Coal Secretary Alok Perti is joining us on this discussion. Mr. Perti, good evening. We spoke a few days ago about the situation in India where coal shortages were becoming concerning. The coal ministry since then has come out and said we'll do everything we can to make sure there isn't a shortage. But today you have a major steel producer saying that they see steel prices going up. Now, are those some of the effects that we will see? A prioritization of this limited supply of coal, perhaps to ensure that homes are lit up first?
Well, I don't get the question fully, but the perspective what you are saying is that the what is the impact in India of the rise in say the oil price, the gas prices, the scramble for more coal in other parts of the world. What is going to be the impact on the coal prices all over the world, and how is it going to impact India? Well, I think today the important thing is that uh, which one of the gentlemen Hansen said is that there is a growing uh, I would say understanding that to as of date the renewable energy sources have not stabilized in the sense that it's still the fluctuations in the needs of energy could create problems, and that there is a fallback on more stable energy sources, which really means the base load kind of source should be very stable, which is going back to saying that you have to look at your own grids and see stability, and sources like coal may have a little comeback for maybe a short period. In India, since the majority of the energy comes from coal.
Rephrase. Mr. Perti, let me come in. Let me come in. Yeah,
Yes.
let me come in and rephrase my question more specifically if I wasn't clear enough earlier. What I'm asking is, do you think we've come to a point where the government is going to have to decide where it prioritizes that limited coal supply? Now, the context of what I'm asking is a story my colleague has done today, Prakash, where he's saying that the mineral industry has now written to the government for immediate intervention, saying that they have to ensure enough supply of coal to steel and aluminum companies. Otherwise, they will be at critical levels and they will halt operations. So, the government right now is faced with the question of where to prioritize the supply of this limited coal. Do you think we've come to that point? That's my question.
You see, the prioritization of the government will have to prioritize wherever there are shortages. They're bound to do it. Well, I think to my mind, the prioritization would be very clear. That it has to be power. Without power, you cannot run the industry. Now it comes to steel and other minerals. Steel is looking for coking coal. Well, I think there is going to be a crisis because of import, because largely we depend on import of coking coal, metallurgical coal for production of steel. The other industry which is probably going to be hit and probably is also crying is cement. Uh, if we were going to prioritize, the priority will go to coal. Take it for granted. The other industry may have to wait or import coal at a much higher price from overseas sources. This is what will actually emerge, and this is something that one had witnessed even a couple of years ago when shortages of coal were noticed. The priority then did go to power, and almost no new deals were being signed for supply of coal to steel or to cement. This happened a couple of years ago also. These are transitory phases. Once the crisis gets over and the coal availability increases, then then the supplies to the other sectors would have to be resumed or others taken up. In the intervening
Sure.
period, it will have to be
Sure. Now,
import.
that takes me to my... Sure. Yes, that takes me to my next question, because imported coal has also become expensive, and different countries, different areas of the world have different priorities. Like, so for example, if Europe is more dependent on renewable energy, India, China are still more dependent on fossil fuels, on thermal energy. Paul, do you see the situation as transitory? And what do you think is the impact that it will have on the kind of recovery that we've been seeing around the world? Because a lot of this is due to a rising demand, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's only transitory is if, depending on the policy responses that come from this shock. I think it's a wake-up call for policymakers and everyone in the industry, in the energy industry, that yes, demand for energy is only going up. For some demand for, say, coal or for oil, we talk about maybe them peaking at some point or have already peaked. But for energy generally, demand is only going to go up. There's urbanization, there's population growth. Demand is going to continue, and having the right diversity of supply, of storage in place, because remember that storage for some of these things is expensive, and actually the technology is not quite there to store it on a mass scale. So these are some things that everyone around the world has to consider in terms of ensuring there aren't so many shocks, because yes, the shift towards a greener economy is very important, and there is a big push, and it's important. But at the same time, everyone's lizard brain just worries right now about whether the lights are going to stay on. And that is something that's going to be, energy security is going to go hand in hand with energy sustainability for the next 2 decades until we resolve some of these issues.
Well, this is the big test for renewable energy, isn't it? Mr. Hansen, what do you see the impact as of this crisis, and do you think it will be transitory?
Well, I think we'll see inflation or price pressures generally across the world stay elevated for longer. So central bankers' belief in transitory inflation, I think we can put to rest. It will stay with us for a longer period of time. The demand for raw materials is only going to increase, as Paul said. And we're talking about energy here, but just the whole green transformation also requires a lot of metals, and demand for those areas will remain firm. And what we're also seeing right now is this mismatch between what investors want and what the market needs. Investors want to focus and invest in renewables, but the market actually needs the old economy to thrive for a number of years to come. And that mismatch, where in terms of where investments are going, is one that potentially could leave us in a situation where energy prices and commodity prices in general will be on the high side over the coming years. And I think that is and with the situation we're seeing in Europe now, and also in Asia, where we are seeing the shortfall, the only thing you really can do if you're struggling with increasing supply in the short term, that is you have to kill demand. And as you just talked about in India, that is occurring, and we're already seeing first signs of that in Europe as well.
That's true. Could this energy crisis upset the apple cart of recovery is the big question that we have to ponder, because look at it, all other factors seem to be coming together. This is perhaps the most optimistic we've been, at least in India, in the last 2 years as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Fingers crossed that a third wave doesn't come. And now you have this energy crisis that threatens to play spoil sport. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us in For This Perspective. But what really are the reasons, and how widespread is this global energy crisis? Take a look. In the midst of a global energy crisis which threatens to derail some of the recovery that we've been seeing in major parts of the world post-coronavirus pandemic, easing and increasing paces of vaccination. Well, it certainly seems so. Whether it's Europe, the United Kingdom, China, or even India, there are more and more reports coming in of a shortage of fuel, of energy, of gas, of coal. So let's look at it one by one. Let's start with what's happening in Europe, where gas prices have zoomed in the last 1 month, mostly on the back of resurgent demand. Now, the reasons for these are many, but one of the primary ones is that Europe now depends more and more on cleaner energy, on renewable energy. And those sources of renewable energy, either hydro or wind or solar, haven't really been running very efficiently. Production has been hampered due to a variety of climatic reasons. That explains the kind of crisis that Europe is seeing. Europe also usually looks at spot prices and now is working on formula to get more energy or more gas from Russia on a sustainable basis. Let's move now to what is happening in the United Kingdom, where petrol pumps have run dry and it has become a huge domestic issue with a lack of energy, especially as the winter months and the cold weather begins. So now in the UK, part of the problem is because of Brexit, because of the new visa rules. They've simply run out of truck drivers to transport the fuel they need for their petrol pumps. So they're trying to work on this by issuing last minute permissions and orders to get more and more truck drivers in to transport that fuel. So the UK in part has this crisis because of a lack of manpower, and that is part of the supply block. Let's now move to China and see what's happening there. So the powerhouse of China, the factory of the world, is also seeing a lot of pains. We've already seen reports of quite a few provinces facing power cuts, some enforced. Now it's been spilling into residential areas as well. Now China depends on coal. They have thermal based energy for about 70 to 75% of their needs. So China's problems are because of a couple of factors. For one, they want cleaner skies. They've signed pretty stringent emission norms, and for the Winter Olympics, they want blue skies. So they have on purpose cut down the amount of productions factories can do to close down the number of emissions. These power cuts are now rolling into the domestic sector as well, in part because international coal prices have shot up hugely, especially in countries like Indonesia, because of bad monsoons in Indonesia, which is not allowing them to produce more coal. So look at how it's all interconnected. Now from China, let's move to what is happening in India, where we may be staring at our own energy shortage. So now there have been several reports that a lot of the power plants in India have coal left for just about 4 days, some for between 4 to 10 days. So the stocks are definitely dwindling. Now as a result of this, there are reports that the government may prioritize where this coal goes to. Again, India depends largely on coal, largely on thermal energy for our energy needs. So about 70 to 75%, like China, is coal-based energy. Coal prices are skyrocketing, so we have to figure out whether we're going to buy coal at these very high rates. Coal prices in Indonesia, for example, has gone from $60 a ton to $200 a ton. A large steel maker has now said that steel prices will go up as the government looks at possibly restricting the supply of coal to some of these industries. So India is also facing its own issues there. Now let's look at the reasons of why this is happening around the world and whether we can find common reasons among all of these areas around the world. So one major common reason is a resurgence of demand post-COVID-19. Now COVID-19, its second wave, third wave, has struck at different places in the world at different times, but largely we're seeing a bounce back and a massive bounce back in demand all over the world. Any activity you do will require energy. People are going out more, they're using more transport, they're buying more things, more production is required, and all of those energy needs have risen while supply is still the same in some places. They've not planned enough for it, and in other cases there are local factors like weather, climatic conditions, etc., which are making sure that there's supply chain bottlenecks. So demand is one big factor. Local reasons, like I told you, the truckers in UK or monsoons in India, coal production is usually a bit depressed during the monsoons. Coal mines get filled up with water and they can't produce as much. So factors like that. What is adding to all of the tension is very high crude prices, which are looking like they're moving upwards, and that may lead to a bit of volatility as well. Another big factor which people are now beginning to question is the transition to renewable energy. Remember, a number of nations, especially in Europe, have already committed to using more and more renewable energy. And this is a true test of that transition, because when demand surges, is renewable energy efficient enough to match up to that demand? A lot of renewable energy depends on nature, whether it's wind, water, or the sun. All of those conditions aren't always conducive. The switchover becomes troublesome, difficult, and expensive at times. So these are some of the reasons why you're hearing a lot nowadays about a global energy crisis.